The recording has started. This will be edited for our YouTube channel so that people are able to view this who weren't able to be here. But I do want to welcome everybody for being here. All right, well, I'll go ahead and get us started. Welcome, everybody. This is the Vermont Association for the Blind and Visually Impaired Friend and Family Support Group meeting that we are having here tonight. We're very grateful for our panelists who are joining us. My name is Dan Norris. I am the Director of Adult Services with the Vermont Association for the Blind and Visually Impaired. I myself am visually impaired. I have a juvenile form of macular degeneration called Stargardt's. And for those of you who are not familiar with it, I developed it when I was 7 years old, between the ages of 7 and 9. I went from having typical vision to having no central vision. At that time, I had peripheral vision, so vision on the outside that was 2200 with best correction. And today, my central field loss has expanded in both eyes, and in my left eye, I'm about 2400, and in my right eye, I'm 2600 in the peripheral vision with glasses. And so I grew up with a visual impairment, and so our topic tonight is very important to me. It's been a topic that's been important to myself as well as my loved ones, my family, my friends. And so just to kind of set the stage, I want to talk a little bit about how individuals who develop a visual impairment, they go through stages of adjustment in their life. And these stages are not static. These stages change over time as we have experiences and that help us to grow our understanding of who we are. And then likewise, we might slide back and forth in that adjustment if we have something traumatic that takes place or something that reminds us of the trauma that occurred at the time that we developed our visual impairment. And that's really important to remember, is that the development of a visual impairment initially for individuals is traumatic. There's a trauma in being told by your eye care provider that you are blind, or that you are going to have diminished vision that cannot be fixed. And that's a very traumatic experience. That's the initial stage, and that can lead to shock and denial. And it can lead to where you don't believe it. You're looking for something that's going to fix it. You can't believe what's happened. And that can lead to the next couple stages, which are mourning and withdrawal, where you might find yourself pulling away from other people or pulling away from situations. And that can lead to a time of depression. Sometimes, anger. That anger can be turned outwards. It can also be turned inwards. Sometimes depression is defined as having anger turned inwards towards oneself. And this can go on for quite a while. And this is not limited to a certain age either. It's something that can happen when you're very young. It's something that can happen when you're very old. It's something that can happen again when you're reminded of your visual impairments. And I'll share an experience in a moment related to that from my own life. And then eventually, you're able to move into a position where you start to have a reaffirmation, a redefinition of oneself, where you start to think of the vision as not being what defines you, but what you define what it means to be someone with a visual impairment. There's a realization of who you are and the reality of the world around you. And at that stage, you're more open to maybe learning some things that can help you to adapt your life, coping strategies, how to walk across town and get to where you need to get to and buy the thing you need to buy. You start to learn strategies that can help you to adapt and to grow and to reach your dreams. And this all then leads towards that final stage of being able to have a sense of self-worth and what you're able to contribute to other people and to those around you. And your self-esteem grows. But then, and the reason we call it adjustment as opposed to acceptance is because you become adjusted, but there are things that can happen that might knock you off that adjustment. I had a moment when my son was about 4 years old or so. We were on the playground, and it was a wood chip playground with a wooden structure. And some people on this call have heard this story. I apologize if you heard it before. Um, but he was running across the playground, and at the time, I was the one that was, there and watching him and playing with him. My wife and our daughter had gone somewhere else, and he ran into my blind spot, which I have no vision in the center of my vision, and he was gone, just vanished. I looked around, he was gone. I couldn't see him. And that shock of having him disappear, I started to get really mad at myself and saying, well, how could I have lost him? How could I let that happen? I know I'm visually impaired. Why wasn't I watching him closer? And I started, mentally moving into this phase where I was, being mad at myself. Anger turned inward towards oneself. And I caught myself because I knew about the adjustment process, and I knew that I needed to hold off on that because at that moment I needed to find my son. And I thought, okay, what are my coping and mobilization strategies? What am I able to do here? And I began to systematically search and call out for him. At the time, he had a speech delay, so he was not a very verbal kid. He was not responsive verbally at the time. And I started systematically searching across the playground, and I found him. He had crawled under one of the wooden play structures, but when I saw him under the wooden play structure, I realized he's a little kid with sandy brown hair, and he's wearing a tan shirt and khaki shorts, and he was on wood chips, and he was blending in perfectly. And I thought, oh, what am I thinking? And so the next time we went to the playground, he was wearing a bright orange shirt, bright yellow shorts. It looked like Crayolas had thrown up all over him. So I was adapting so that I could see him on the playground with my low vision, having him brightly colored, having him uniquely brightly colored, so I could pick him out amongst a group of other brightly colored kids, and adapting for my vision loss. But at the time, if I had given in to that anger, that depression over what had happened, I wouldn't have been able to do what I needed to do. And so being able to catch ourselves when we find ourselves derailed and maybe sent back a little bit in our adjustment process is a really important skill to have. Now, tonight, we're not talking about me, although I've been talking about myself. I apologize. We're talking about the family and friends in our lives. And the reason I share this first is because something that's really important for us to understand and really important for the friends and family to understand in our lives is that we are not the only ones, those of us who are visually impaired, who go through the adjustment process. The people in our lives, our loved ones, our friends, our family, they go through this adjustment process too. And so they need to understand the process we're going through, and they need to understand that this process applies to them as well. And we need to understand that they're going through this process as well, because our life changes their lives. Their circumstances change because our circumstances change. My parents have spoken to me. They a little bit about the process they went through, and we're going to have a parent tonight talking about their experiences. Where my father who was a firefighter, would hop into the cab of the fire truck and throw the lights on and start to drive to a fire, and he'd think in his mind, "This is something my son's never going to do." My mother, she worried about, will Dan ever get married? Will he ever have kids? Well, one of the panelists tonight happens to be my wife, and she's going to speak very frankly and very honestly about our relationship. You guys can ask her any questions you want, but that is something that parents worry about. My siblings have talked to me about the adjustment that they had as they started to have this brother who is blind, and some of the thoughts, the experiences, the things that they went through. And so tonight, we're going to be hearing from a parent of someone who is blind and visually impaired. We're going to be hearing from my wife, who is the wife of a middle-aged individual who's blind and visually impaired. And we're going to be hearing from an individual, Richard, who is a partner of someone who's blind and visually impaired. And we're very excited to have them speak to their experiences as well as we'll open up after that for panel question and answer session for everybody that's on the call to be able to ask questions they have related to their lives. You can ask me or any of them questions that you have tonight after we have completed our panel discussion. And so at this point, we're going to ask all three of our panelists to answer the first question. And we'll start with Sarisha, and then we'll hear from Debbie, and then we'll hear from Richard. And the first question that we're going to ask tonight is to please describe your relationship or connection to the person who's blind and visually impaired. So we'll go ahead and Sarisha, if you'd like to unmute and answer the question, then turn it over to Debbie and then on to Richard. And they'll ask the same question.
Yeah, hi everyone, it's nice to be here. I am a parent of a almost 14-year-old son who is visually impaired. That's my relationship with vision impairment, and that is my only and first experience in my family with vision impairment.
Thank you, Sarisha. Debbie?
Hi, everybody. I'm Debbie Norris. I am married to Dan Norris. We have been married for 22 years. Our anniversary was just last week. We have 3 kids. And like you, Sarisha, Dan was actually the first person I think I really knew very closely who was visually impaired as well, who had a visual impairment.
Thank you, Debbie. Richard?
So hello, everybody again. Peg and I are life partners. We've been together for 14 years. We were both widowed years ago and came together and met each other online. Peg has a career as a professional dancer. She's also a choreographer. She does photography. She does drawing. She writes poems. She's very, very creative and wonderful partner, to say the least. And I'm an old college teacher who's been hanging out in colleges for about 50 years. Anyhow, I've asked Peg to kind of join me here so she can correct me when I mess up or add things as needed. So
that sounds good. Thank you, Richard. All right. Well, so we'll slide back to Sarisha, and the second question is, can you describe how your understanding of your family or friends' experience with vision loss has evolved over time?
Yeah, I think it's still evolving. Let me just say that. Our son is just becoming a teenager, so it comes with issues there too. So our, understanding and of what his challenges are changing as he is growing. When we adopted our son when he is a year and a half. So when he came to us first, we did all the things. We took him to the doctors, we took him to the dentist, we took him to the eye specialist. And that's the first time we learned that he cannot see anything. He's blind with no vision. And one of the challenge was he never learned to see because he was grown up in an orphanage for the first few months of his life in a crib. That is 20 plus hours in a crib. So there was no stimulation in his eye. Like he's not seeing anything new for all hours on end. So the eyes never learned how to see. So that is the first time I even knew such a thing existed. Like your eyes need to be trained to see. It's just that babies wake up and they see, I mean, and dumb sounds very dumb, but that's my understanding at first, right? So we learned, and we just also didn't realize it could improve once he gets chances to actually exercise his vision and how he sees it. It's a small sample, but that's how our understanding changed just within few months, after we, got him. And, later with the doctor's help and VABVI from, the minute we knew he was in Vermont Genetics Network and VABVI, all the people like you helped us understand what does it mean when the doctor says something. That first they're like high myopia. I'm like, what is that? And unfortunately, doctors only have so much time to sit with you and educate. And so we had to get the education from people like you, organizations like you. So that also evolved our understanding on that, like what does it mean? How does it go? Like you, Dan, I mean, we also went through the stages of, oh, it gotta be able to fix it. There's a cure. There is something, you just need surgery or something. It will be fixed, That is, again, coming from lack of understanding, lack of fear and worry as parents. So, I mean, over the years, we learned what it means, what is and what cannot be changed, and how do we help. So I think it's evolving, like I said. But like you, it's stages, acceptance, anger, denial, acceptance back.
Thank you, Suresh. That you shared a lot of really helpful information. There is a lot of understanding of what all the doctors are telling you. That can be a real challenge. Yeah. Debbie.
Okay. And I apologize in advance. I am an emotional person, so I'll try and control myself. So Dan and I met when we were in our early 20s and we were living in downtown Portland, Oregon. So, as most of you who know Dan know, you don't really notice his visual impairment, first of all. That's not really what you notice first about him. So I kind of didn't really notice. We lived in downtown Portland. Neither of us had a car, and it was a walking city and stuff. So when he asked me on a date and I said yes, we were going to go see a movie and we were going to walk to the train and take it to the theater. And that's when he kind of told me that he had this visual impairment. And I said, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize. Do you want to do something else? And he said, oh, no, I like to go to the movies. And I said, okay. And I kind of asked him a little bit about it. And I said, oh, could they do a transplant? And he said, no, it doesn't work that way. And I was like, oh, that's too bad. I'm sorry, but it wasn't really it wasn't what we were focusing on. So we went to the movie, which helped, the screen was really big and we sat kind of close and that was great. So it really wasn't on my mind a lot, I guess I could say. Maybe that's just because I didn't want it to have to be. When we got engaged, which we did rather quickly, my mom was a little worried. She said, are you sure you want to take this on? And my attitude at the time was, we could get married and one of us could get hit by a car 2 weeks after the wedding, getting married isn't a guarantee that everything will be great. So I think that's okay. The first time I think I really had to come to grips with it was somebody mentioned that they had seen something online that there was a treatment for Stargardt's. And I was like, oh, and I was at work and I looked it up and I was like, oh, wow, look at that. And I went home and I told Dan, I was like, oh, I saw this stuff online. And there was just this look of pity on his face. He'd already been through this, when he was a kid. He'd probably seen his parents go through it, but now he was getting ready to watch me go through it, which is I had to realize, like you, Suresh, I was not going to be able to fix this. There was nothing, this was just the reality, and that, and that was okay. That was hard. I didn't love that. But, things were great, and Dan was in school, and the adaptations, I would read him textbooks, not mine, because we were newlyweds, and it was great. Just for all of you now, the technology has gotten a lot better. So now is an advantageous time to be visually impaired. And when we moved here, that was a big adjustment. So we lived downtown in Portland. We walked everywhere. There was tons of public transportation. And when we moved here, it really did clip Dan's wings. he'd been used to walking everywhere. He could get anywhere. He was really familiar. And we moved here in the fall, and I was pregnant, and the weather was bad, and we live in Barrie. And it is like, I mean, it's a reasonably sized town for Vermont, but you know, like there was not a lot of places he could go, and I didn't want to walk anywhere because I was pregnant and tired. And so I felt really bad for Dan. Like, you know, I wanted to help him as much as I could, but I was tired, and then we had a baby, and that was hard as well. And we did buy a vehicle, and then, you know, it was like, oh, I'm gonna always be the driver, and that's fine, right? But it's just one of those things that you just have to realize, and that's okay. Like, it wasn't a bad thing. It was just, oh, this is how it's gonna be. And it used to kind of embarrass me. Like, I didn't want people to think that I was like a henpecker, like that I forced Dan to let me drive. So I'd be like, you have to make sure people know you can't drive, so they know it's not me like being bossy or anything. So Dan's condition is genetic. So the other thing we deal with is that our kids could conceivably develop Stargardt's. We have a 20-year-old, a 17-year-old, and an 11, almost 12-year-old. And so we still, I mean, it's there in the back of our heads, like it could happen. And obviously, it's not the end of the world. We know that because Dan lives a very full and happy life, I hope. It's happy, right, honey? You're good?
Yeah.
But we have to realize, like, if this happens, we're going to have to, you know, like, now what do we do? So I wouldn't say that's like a cloud or anything. I just think about it. Is that's kind of what we want to talk about? Is that good? Everybody?
That's good. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Debbie. Richard, so how has your understanding of Peg's visual impairment evolved over time?
Well, unlike the other two speakers, I sort of, both Peg and I have sort of come to discover her visual impairment gradually over time. It wasn't like when we first met, it was an issue or whatever. I did, within the first few years, Peg was diagnosed with age-related macular degeneration in both eyes. And she can correct me if I got this wrong. One was wet and one was dry or whatever. And so she was getting shots in one eye for a while, then at some point in both eyes, and beginning to lose some of her vision. And then she had cataract surgery on both eyes. It didn't really help on the right eye very much, but it did seem to help a little bit on the left eye. And that was just a few years ago. And then and giving an injection in her good eye, her left eye, led to an infection, a very bad infection, and she lost all sight in that eye. So that was her good eye. So there was a time which was very, very scary for both of us, where it looked like she would really be seriously impaired. But that has come back gradually. So she's legally blind, but she can still get around pretty well. And that's, I think that's where things stand. So now we are dealing with, we're closer to where others are in terms of working with one person who has
unable to drive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm going to hold off on some of the needs that she has until the next question or so.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Richard. And I hope everyone sees, you know, the participants we have on the panel all come from very different backgrounds in terms of where and when they connected with the person who's blind and visually impaired, whether it was a child or someone they met that already was visually impaired, or someone they met who over time has become visually impaired. And that's intentional, as this panel discussion is speaking to a wide group of people who are on this call right now that have all very, very different backgrounds. But we're going to see commonalities in the stories as we move through. So thank you, Richard. Appreciate that. So the next question is, how do you know when you should help your family or friend and when you should not help your family and friend? So Sarisha, if you'd like to take that.
So I think the word for today and for this journey is evolving. our understanding or even knowing when and when not to help is also evolving. Maybe some of it is because we are parenting a child, so just like, you see no, without vision impairment, without any of that, you will see, parents having to come to a place where, oh, that kid doesn't need you to hold his hand or doesn't need help in this, right? That same kind of evolution is happening for us, even with his vision. At the beginning, I mean, like every other loving, supporting parent, we are like, we had to protect him. We had to do everything for him, right? It's like we just need to do that, right? I think, the things that change for us is help we got from, I don't know what the word you use, Dan, social workers is, that's not their title, the teachers and the VABVI teachers and the other, people, but, in a layman's terms, I just say, the helpers,
Yeah.
helped us figure out, all he needs is a bigger piece of paper. He doesn't need you to hold his hand and help him write.
Right.
He needs a technology. He doesn't need you to skip that over. He can do it in different ways. So that is a big part of our learning when and when not to help, is getting other people who are specialists kind of tell us and help us. So, I mean, one of the example, I mean, my son also has autism, so it's kind of, a little bit plays into like how much we can and cannot help him. But he used to be terrified of walking in the parking lot, like anywhere going into, because it's like the cars is going to come and hit me, right? So we used to hold his hand. He would like, doesn't matter, you have to hold your hand, our hands. That is the only safe way to make sure he gets to the car and gets to wherever we need to go. Now, as he's becoming a teenager and he's, talking about, maybe working part-time one day soon and all of that. So he's like, okay, maybe we don't need to hold your hand anymore. The cane, again, he had to learn. So, we taught him the first cane and how to walk and what does it mean? How do you hold? And, all of that. The cane is there to help, and the cars will not hit you because they can see the cane. You might not be able to see the car, but the people who are driving the car will see the cane and they won't understand what that means and they won't hit you. So it's kind of like that, we had to let go. It's scary. It's it's just sometimes it just feels helpless, but now the help also changes how and how we cannot help. In school, the VABVI teachers help us. Every time he changed schools, they would come, orient him, and look through the doorways. One of the example is like they looked at, they have a lot of glass doors. He will walk into them. Let's put something neon on the glass so he would know how to walk. Our first instinct is, oh my God, what's going to happen? How he is going to move from one class to another. Maybe he should have an aid that will walk him from class A to class B. No, Sirisha, all he needs is a bright neon sign on the glass so he can walk independently, right? So that is how kind of like we had to learn, adjust. sometimes it's as a parent, it's difficult and challenging. As a child, it is very difficult for him because he's like, it's not fair. I had to use bigger paper. I want to be just like everybody else. It's not fair. I have to sit the first two rows of classroom. I don't want to use my cane. So the help, how we help also depends on what he would need and how he's going through, what he's going through. And, so it took him a while to understand the cane is there so that you don't need help. Because at first he was very, very opposed to using a cane because he's like, I don't, I want to be just like other people, right? And I don't need help. So it took us, the way we help is not the forcing him to use the cane, but rather saying, because you have a cane, you don't need to hold my hand while walking in the parking lot. Because you have a cane, you can cross the road by yourself. It's still a struggle and we are learning. I'm sure we'll learn for a while. Even right now, as it stands, he cannot drive. We struggled as parent, like, is it a good thing to tell him now? Or wait until he's at age that driving is an issue? How do we help and how do we get him to a place where he accepts that he's blind, he accepts that he cannot see? So I am using the driving as an example because that's something he worked through. We, with the help of the doctor and the, our therapists and, the teachers, we found the right time to tell him and right way to tell him. So now I think a year and a half later, he's like, oh, Mom, yeah, I know I can't drive, so blah, 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 I'm going to do this. But that's how I see our role of how we help him is help him find acceptance and work through his limitations so he can be his full potential. That's how, that's our hope and that's what we are trying anyways. Yeah.
What a great answer. Thank you so much, Sarisha. If I can insert really quickly here a story from my own childhood. First of all, thank you for being a parent who is seeking to help your child to adjust and to do all the things that they want to do and can do. And I love what you said at the beginning, because kids are still kids, even if they have a visual impairment, they're still kids. And there's all of the adolescent issues, plus there's a visual impairment. And at one point, I was trying to use my visual impairment to get out of doing the things I didn't want to do. And one of the things I didn't want to do was pick up my dog's droppings in the backyard, which was my responsibility. It was my dog. And my parents, they wanted me to go pick up, clean up the backyard, take care of my dog. And I didn't want to do it. So I said, oh, I can't see it. The contrast of it's the dirt. I can't find it back there. I'm legally blind, guys, and I was using that to get out of doing what I wanted to do. And my dad was a little bit more of a soft touch at that time. And then one day he was walking home and he saw a man in the park who was totally blind with his guide dog, and the dog did his business. And the person who's totally blind took out a sandwich bag, put it over his hand, found it, it went and threw it in the garbage. And my dad thought, wait a minute. that guy's totally blind, and he just picked up that dog poop. And so he came home, got a shovel, said, Dan, get out here, we're going to figure this out. And held me to my duties, literally, to what I needed to do in the backyard. And I'm grateful that they made me do the same chores that all of my siblings did, and to do those things, because it helped me to become an adjusted adult who could do the things that needed to be done. So thank you. As a child who's grown up and been adjusted, thank you for being a good parent. Debbie, how has your understanding evolved over time? All right, how do you know when to help and when not to help? And be honest.
Well, I could always do it better. I mean, anything, I do it better. No, just kidding. I think that the easiest way to know when someone needs help is when they ask for it. So I think that communication is really, really important. And that's a hard one because the person going through vision loss is often not going to want to ask for help. And that's really difficult. So I think that the important key there is to like listen to their words, but also listen to their behavior and their mood and see, like, you know, what they're really asking is this. Like, are they really asking for help, or are they asking for you to be with them while they try something that they're scared to try? Or do they just not like cleaning the bathroom, so they're going to lean in on that or something? So I think communication is really, really important. I think it also works the other way too, which is you need to communicate what you're feeling as well. Like I referenced when we moved here and Dan wasn't able to get places, and I could drive the car, but there were some times when I just physically was very exhausted. So our communication was important in saying, like, honey, I respect that you want to get out. I'm really feeling tired right now. Is there a time that we could do this? You know, can we wait? Is this a need or a want? And so on and so forth. So also like making sure that you're not overextending, but also communicating that with love and respect, which is like, you know, I would love to help, or I want to help, but I can't right now, or what is the best help right now? And I also think collaboration, communication and collaboration, which is, yeah, I can help you with this. Let's talk about how we can work together to do this. Like I drive the car, but Dan works the navigation, or so on and so forth, and things like that. And so I think it's really important. But I do think it's important to develop a language of communication so that you and your partner or your child or the person in your life who has a visual impairment has a way that they can safely communicate when they need help, or when they just need support, or when they need you to express confidence in them so that they can do it. And so I think that and that will develop over time, and there will be missteps, but that's why there's a lot of patience involved. Like I think sometimes in the interest of time, I help more. Like today when we were out driving around, we needed to stop at a gas station to use a restroom. And I could have said, no, Dan, you go in there and find it yourself. But we were in a hurry. And so you said, can you come in with me? And I said, sure, because in the interest of efficiency, we needed to get in, find the bathroom, and leave. And so it wasn't that Dan had learned helplessness. He just understood that we were on a schedule, and I was an adaptation that would get us where we needed to be quicker. And I totally accept that because I wanted to be on time too. But I think that that's where like understanding and communicating and being sensitive to each other's needs is important. And so that's what I would say, communication. And I would say it's going to be constantly developing. I remember one time we were playing a board game with some friends in Portland, and we were having a great time, and Dan was losing bad. And, you know, we had like this ribbing going on and stuff, and it was real fun. And after our friend left, Dan was still kind of sulking. And I was like, oh, you know, you big baby. And he's like, you guys were playing too fast, and I couldn't keep up. And I felt really bad because we were so used to Dan, you know, just playing along and stuff, that we didn't realize that we were unintentionally leaving him out. And I did feel bad. He wasn't just sulking because he lost. He was frustrated because his vision kept him from participating fully, and we were not sensitive to that. And so, I mean, I wish that we had been a little more sensitive. I wish that he had felt comfortable saying, hey guys, can we just slow it down a little bit? Or, you know, and that I really wish he'd felt comfortable doing that. And I feel bad that we created an environment where he didn't. So when we play now, like games with the kids and stuff, we try and, like, our kids, if you play Uno with any of our kids, they put down that card and they say that color and that number. Like, it's just automatic to, you know, try and include everybody. So communicate and collaborate. That's how I think, you know.
Excellent. Thank you. And yes, I should have been a better communicator at that time. Richard.
Okay, well, the first thing is the areas where Peg has needed help sort of evolved very gradually. Again, this is in contrast to Sarisha and Debbie's experience. The first thing was driving. Peg was she was driving for a while where she probably shouldn't have been. She just pointed out that some of the she was okay, but the signs, she couldn't read the signs. That seemed like a bad sign in and of itself. So the driving, and then the reading, she went to a larger font with a Kindle, and then more recently she's listening to this audiobooks basically, and not trying to read. There's a lot of issues around reading print, emails and so forth that she needs some help with. There's issues around, you all know these things, but they came out kind of gradually around the stove or the microwave. It's hard to read different things, and we're getting help with all those buttons and things you put on there, but it's all very tricky business. There are a lot of personal things like earrings that get lost, or the things come off the end, you can't put them back on. Or occasionally when Peg puts lipstick on, it's quite remarkable how it works. Let me see what else. Oh, there's also over time, the navigating the world with lower and lower vision it takes more energy and effort, and so I think there's been energy issues that have evolved along with everything else that Peg is dealing with. And those are the kinds of needs she has. Some of them I have to help out with. Some she does herself, and some she has someone comes in for a couple hours, a few days a week. But the question of how do I know when to help or not to help is a bigger one, because it's been I guess in some sense we're lucky that it's been gradual. We were both leading fairly independent lives. I as a teacher and Peg as a choreographer and so forth. And then of course we had our interdependent life. But there was certain balance there in terms of how much is independent and how much was interdependent.
Like we took turns cooking and things.
Yeah, like, for example, we took turns cooking, whereas now I do most of all the cooking with Peg's verbal help with that. So what we, well, I lost my train of thought, except, oh yeah, well anyhow, the point is that over time, the independent parts got less, and the interdependent, the connected at the hip kind of thing, got greater. So it's been a big adjustment to that, because I think as it happens, I have to admit that sometimes I feel, gosh, what happened to the time I had to do such and such? I used to have so much time to go walking or whatever, and I have to do less. And so there is, ladies and gentlemen, a little resentment here and there that we have to deal with, some tensions that come up between us. But I think for the most part, we're working it out. Unfortunately, we're both retired, so it's not like the demands of work are pulling us apart. So we have the time to work more together. And that question of adjustment process, Dan, that you talked about, it's been a biggie for us, adjusting our relationship, and how we work together and so forth. I think that's probably pretty much. I do think there is an issue of autonomy, and not helping where Peg can do things on her own, and sometimes feeling, as this is repeating what Dan said, sometimes feeling that maybe she could do it, but it's easier for me to get her for me to do it. Those are the kind of things we have to work out, and we're doing a good job of it.
Yeah. And thank you for those honest answers, because that is the reality of the situation, and one of the main reasons why we're having this discussion, because having that clear, open communication on both sides helps to reduce resentment and frustration and so forth. But if it goes unaddressed, those issues can become major, resentment and things like that. And speaking now to the people who are on the call who are visually impaired, that's something that we need to remember, is that not only are we receiving assistance and help from our family and friends that we love, we also need to be contributing to that relationship as well. We need to be giving back to the family and friends in some way. How they're helping us. How are we helping them? Is something that we need to think about as well. Just some food for thought for all of us who are visually impaired. We have the last panel question here, and then after everyone answers, we'll open up for question and answer. I'm gonna mix things up here. So Richard will stay with you if that's okay, and we'll go from Richard, then we'll go to Sarisha, and then we'll finish with Debbie. When and how do you get the support that you need? Who do you go to for support? How do you find that support? And so we're not talking about the person who's visually impaired anymore. We're talking about you as the family or friend of someone who's visually impaired. When you need help, where and when do you, how do you get the help that you need? We'll start with Richard.
Well, I haven't really felt a great need for help. I have thought about going back to a therapist I had years ago, but I haven't felt quite the need for that. I have a few close friends and a brother who I could talk to. But what I have done, and I've also looked at sort of caregiver groups to join. I discovered the one at our local senior center is focused largely on providing care to people with cognitive issues, early dementia or Alzheimer's or whatever. And that, of course, isn't what we're facing. And so what I decided to do, I go to the UU Church in Woodstock, as I thought I'd start a caregivers group, and we've got one started now. It has people who are caregivers for people who are very, very different needs. And it's not just cognitive or physical, it's combinations of things. And so that's just getting off the ground. I have to admit, there's a certain selfishness in doing that. I mean, I don't think that's bad. I think if you do something, you like to get something out of it yourself, but it's something that other people needed. And so we're just getting started, so I can't report back to you yet about how successful it is. And of course, we've got a lot of support from folks like Dan and Linda and so on. But it's not been emotional support necessarily, but it's been a great help to us in dealing with the kind of needs that we are struggling with, particularly with regard to technology. So
excellent. Thank you, Richard. Sarisha?
Support for for ourselves. We are a part of a caregiver group very early on. That's how I actually learned about VABVI. I just, through a caregiver group very early on. The caregiver group is for kids with different, abilities or disabilities. How you say? At first that group, I went to support. How do I support our son? How do I do things better? It turned into, next step of like, am I a bad mother? Am I a bad person? Am I not doing all that I could to help my son? So it's that group evolved, like, how do we take care of ourselves? How, it is validating to kind of say, I'm tired, or things like that. But I do now also take support from a therapist. I know I brought up the driving thing before. I'd never even thought about driving, challenges my son would face one day, right? He's little, it's like party training was bigger, like, we went past that. Yeah, right? So I wasn't thinking. I remember distinctly one day, I think it's HuffPost, I read an article from a 17, a woman now, but she wrote the first time she learned she couldn't drive because of her vision issues was when she was 17 and went to the doctor for permission to do, driver's permit, to learn how to drive. That's when she found out that she cannot drive. and she resented her parents for years after that is the first time she learned. I remember that day, like, yesterday reading that, and I'm like, oh my God, our son will hate us. We are doing everything wrong. Or we'll do something wrong and they will hate us. Uh, that is the first time, right? Really, I was like, yeah, maybe I need some help. Work through these kind of insecurities or fears. It has nothing to do with like, that yes, we had, worries about whether he will drive, how would he feel when he knows, but also like, personal fears of I'm a bad mother, I'm not doing everything I can, I'm not helping the right way, I'm going to be the person that makes him not be independent, because I didn't do something right. Those kind of fears and doubts and self-doubts. It's not consistent, it's not prevalent, but it happens. It happens time to time. So I do get help from a therapist to talk about, to get out of my own way. Basically, is like, no, it's something I do or don't do is not going to, ruin my son's life forever and ever. But it takes time and help from other people. I do have family, friends I talk to very openly. And now I also talk to my son, when I feel overwhelmed. Yes, he's just going to be 14, but we learned that being upfront with him also helps. Like, this is how I'm feeling. I feel like I have to do this. And I feel tired. What can you do to help me? So it's a combination, but I also talk to VABVI teachers. I'm like, I am so worried if is ever going to be an independent living person. Will he go to college? What will happen? All those, crazy word vomit. I do that with the VABVI teachers too, but I feel like, it takes a village to raise a child. For me, it's yes, that's true, but it also takes a village to help me. And my village is big.
Excellent. Thank you, Surisha. Debbie.
Oh, I think I'm gonna have to agree with Richard and Sarisha. I think, what was the question again?
Where do you go and how do you get the help that you need?
Okay, so I do draw a lot of strength from my faith and spirituality, and I think that helps me keep a sort of a perspective on the situation. I think it's an interesting balance of, wow, it's important to remember that you're you and your loved one is them, and the visual impairment is like this very small part of a wonderful relationship. It doesn't define your partner, and it doesn't take up your whole life. It's not the whole situation. And so it's important to recognize it's there and then to give it its proper place. And then to recognize that we're each our own person and we're a composite of all we are. So like, my life isn't swallowed up in being a caregiver. It's an important part of my life to be a supportive partner to Dan, but I'm still my own person. I still have my own interests. I still have things that I want to do. And part of that is making time for yourself. Having said that, community is so important, and just knowing that you're not alone, not in the sense of like other people but like, it is helpful to like go with Dan and visit people and go to the pals groups and stuff and just talk to all the amazing people in Vermont that have visual impairments and just see like the incredible lives they lead and their incredible attitudes. And just also realizing that as Dan is somebody that I love so much, his success is my success. Like, the tide lifts us both. And so anytime I'm helping him, I'm also helping me because I like to see him succeed, and our family succeeds when either of us succeeds, just like he probably feels good when he helps me succeed and when he supports me in one of something that I want to do. And so I think that I don't think we look at it as helping him drains me. I think we look on it and it lifts us both together to work together. And so I also think knowledge and information, like Sarisha said, help. Like the more we understand and the more we can put our mindset into that, like now I can't go into a store and see something, but I'm like, oh, that would be good for this, for someone with a visual impairment. And I think, oh, Dan, I got this. I thought this would be fun. And just new things to try. And so I think just understanding that enrichment of someone's life who you love also enriches your life, and it enriches everyone's life around them and you is really important. Like there's no, them and us, and then we like struggle to work together. It's that, and I think we need to give ourselves permission to just be like, this really sucks. Like I'll admit, I hate going to the appointments. Dan goes in and they just tell him the same thing, and I hate hearing it every time. There's nothing we can do. And it's very dismissive, and it's not my favorite, but it's one day every couple of years, and we get upset and we go get some chocolate and we wish it wasn't that way, and then we kind of we pull up our big boy pants and we move on, and that's valid too. But we're doing it together, and it's not the only thing in our lives. It's a physical reality. It's not a definition of who we are. It's a facet. And so I draw strength from the fact that Dan's amazing. I have a great life. Everybody I meet in Vermont who has a visual impairment is everybody's great. I just really enjoy them. I love meeting them. I love hearing about their lives. It's almost more fun to just go and talk about their incredible lives. And then I remember, I'm like, oh yeah, we were here to teach you about your iPad. And then we move on to that. But there's so much more out there. I mean, there's just so much to do, and there's so much available, and there's so much more out. And I think we should just accept the reality of the situation and adjust to it, and then just enjoy everything else.
Thank you, Debbie. All right, I just want to highlight a few things that were very common themes that all three of them have said here as resources that are available to people who are friends and family of individuals who are blind and visually impaired. So the professionals that you heard them talking about for both adult and children's services from the Vermont Association for the Blind and Visually Impaired. For children, you have teachers of the visually impaired that can help you to adapt the curriculum and to learn the expanded core curriculum, all the things outside of school that are necessary for children to learn as they're growing up. There's certified orientation mobility specialists that work with children as well that can help them to learn to travel in the community. And all of those individuals can help to advise you as parents as to things that might be able to help you and your child. And then with the adults, we've got vision rehabilitation therapists, which are individuals who can help you learn to live independently in your homes and in your communities, to be able to reach your goals, your vocational goals, as well as your independent living goals, your world traveling goals. And an orientation mobility specialist work with adults as well to learn how to travel in the community, to travel around the world, to do the things that you want to do. And all these professionals can help you, and you just need to reach out and let us know what your needs are, and we can help you to brainstorm those. Also, what was mentioned were support groups. There's lots of different kinds of support groups out there. Amongst adult services here in Vermont, we have something called peer assisted learning and support groups. They call them PALS groups. And there's 10 of those around the state that meet in different parts that you can meet with other people who are visually impaired. It was mentioned by our panelists, the strength that comes from sharing ideas between individuals and between family of individuals who have vision loss, and being able to see other people's strengths and be able to apply them in your lives and be able to give adaptations and ideas to each other. They're very powerful. Those also exist online. There is a group called the Lighthouse Guild that has both a support group for parents as well as a support group for partners of people who are blind and visually impaired. And when we send out the recording of this as an announcement for you all to reference and watch again. We'll include in there the link to the Lighthouse Guild support groups, so you can see all the different kinds of support groups they have. And they have people from all over the country that call in and meet and talk about these different topics in these different groups. There's a tech support group, there's a parent group, there's a parents who are visually impaired group, there's a group for partners, and just lots of different categories to choose from. So we'll include that when we send out the news blast saying, hey, we had the meeting, here's the recording. That link will be attached to it, so you guys can connect with those groups as well. And then again, it was all three individuals talked about the importance of not isolating yourselves, being connected to other people, however that looks for you, whether that's through a community organization, through a church, if that's through a support group, if that's through a Lions Club, Elks Lodge, whatever it might be. Not isolating yourself and being connected to others will help you with your support, as well as help your person in your life who's blind or visually impaired to have connections outside of you as well. So reaching out and drawing people in. At this point, we'll open it up for question and answers. And so if anybody has a question, if they'd like to unmute and ask, they could ask any of us individually or collectively. And we'll consider any question at this point. So feel free to unmute and ask your question.
Dan, Peg has her hand up.
Oh, Peg, please. Yes, I'm sorry.
Oh, thank you. I really enjoyed this conversation so much and appreciate it. And I feel so strongly that the medical profession needs to include this kind of information. When a doctor treats a patient for eye problems, they have to go home and figure out what to do. And I just, from day one, I said, where are your brochures? Where is the information telling me where I can turn? Now, I'm very grateful to have found information online about this group, but it's such hard work to do that. And I hope we ourselves could do something to make it better for future patients.
Thank you, Peg. Yes. Yeah. Go back and tell your doctors, and we will gladly share any information with them that would help them. Thank you. Thank you. Well, I think we're very lucky here in Vermont, and it's a wonderful experience to support each other, and we need to make sure everybody knows about us, and make sure everybody knows and has this information. So share it with friends.
Dan, this is Stephanie. For those who don't know, I'm the Director of Children's Services, and Dan's the Director of Adult Services. One of the questions I get a lot from parents are, my child is struggling with headaches, and I just wondered if anybody here, is this like a lifelong thing? Was it just something that you had to deal with for a period of time? Anybody experiencing headaches related to their visual impairment?
Oh yeah, yeah. I can speak to that. It's very common to get headaches from eye strain, and so some of the things you can do to try to alleviate that is when you are using your vision, when you have low vision and you're using your vision to read, maintaining good posture, so you're not having neck strain and back strain. Really important. Making sure that you're upright and that what you're reading is brought to you and supported on something like a reading stand, as opposed to you holding onto it and bending over. Making sure that the contrast is contrast is as good as possible, so that the letters you're looking at are as sharp as possible. Having the right size font, having the right size magnification, those will help those things. And then using technology, things like optical character recognition to read to you, to give your eyes a break, is really important. And then if there's anyone on who reads Braille, I'd be happy to turn the time to one of you to speak about the ways that you can not have as much strain from reading Braille. There's a lot of techniques for having better posture for Braille and so forth. Does anybody want to speak to that? So making sure that your positioning in Braille, if you're at the table and your hands are up while you're reading Braille, you're gonna wear yourself out. and all of those, physical strains from posture and positioning can lead to headaches and other things. So I do have headaches if I have spent the whole day squinting at a computer or not giving myself the breaks that I need on a regular basis. So it's important to take frequent breaks to avoid eye strain, which leads to headaches, if that's what you're speaking to, Stephanie.
Yeah, well, I think the answer can be all of the above, and I would actually add lighting and,
Yes.
making sure lighting's coming from behind. And I'm the type of person that likes to turn all the lights on in the house. But then I've had coworkers who are just like, no, I need the least amount of light. So everybody's different, but lighting is another aspect to what could cause headaches. Yeah, it's all of the above.
All of the above. Even the positioning of the furniture in your home in relation to the window can be an issue. If your computer is right in front of the window, that can have a lot of light coming from behind the computer. That's going to cause problems. So having your TV in the house in front of the window, not the best situation. So looking at your environment and making sure that everything is positioned and organized in a way that maximizes your vision and has it as comfortable as possible. Wearing sunglasses so that you're not getting as much light irritation throughout the day. Those are good too.
I think with a child, at least in our experience, the things that work is treat it as if it's any other challenge. You were frustrated when you didn't know how to tie your shoes. You're frustrated when you didn't know how to do XYZ. It's just like that. There are ways that you can do what you're trying to do. They're not trying to see. They're trying to see a specific thing or trying to do a specific thing. They can still do that. Right? It's not that the fact that their eyes is not working. It's that they're not able to do something if their vision was, better. That thing could be done different ways. That's how we tackle it. Like, hey, if you want to do that, and because you can't see it, you can't open XYZ, this is the way. I remember once my child was he gets some money for chores. He can't get out of the chores like Dan did. But one of the chores is unloading the dishwasher. And well, you had to do the whole thing in order to get the, whatever money we give him. And it's like, yeah, he leaves very clear glass things in it because he couldn't see. And then I'm like, oh, then I had to do some more. And I'm like, Hobby, you didn't finish it. You didn't do it. And at first, again, the evolution of us learning, I was like, oh yeah, he couldn't see it, right? And he got frustrated. And so we with one of the teachers, Sarah, the VABVI teacher, like, hey, after you unload it, you go put your fingers through and feel for anything that's left, right? So he now knows he's like going to get his chore money. Yeah, it's figuring out what are they frustrated about, even though they show it that they're frustrated. Their frustration comes out as, I can't see. But that's not the real reason they're frustrated about. Finding that kind of helps us help them.
That's a great answer.
That helps.
That when you hear them say, I'm frustrated because I can't see, that isn't necessarily the thing that's frustrating them. I like how you said that. That's good.
I would completely agree with Sarisha, because there's mourning the loss of their sight, and then there's the frustration that they can't do something. So they're mourning the way they used to do it, and then they might be frustrated with learning the new way that they have to do it now. So I think we need to recognize their loss, but at the same time, help be patient and direct them to the new way of doing things.
I liked those comments because you included two parts. One is recognizing their grief at loss. And the other is, yes, but there may be another way to solve this problem. And I like that because it's very respectful of the fact that as an older adult, it's amazing how much grief I have been going through the past several months. And allowing myself to admit that helps, you know, so because, okay, yes, I am grieving of things that I can't do anymore or can't see anymore, but it is also interesting and empowering to learn how to do things differently.
If I could share an experience from my childhood, when I was developing the visual impairment, one of the things that my mom told me was that, there's going to be days where you're going to be very frustrated. And she said, if you want to go into your bedroom and pick up your pillow and scream into it as loud as you can because you're frustrated about what's going on, go ahead and do that. Go scream it out in the pillow. It's okay. You're human. That's a human feeling. That's a natural feeling. It's okay to be mad. Go ahead and do that. But when you're done, let's talk about what we can do next. And there were days I went in and I screamed in the pillow, because it was really frustrating at times, and still is. But that was, it's okay to recognize the human emotion that is frustration and grief. That is human, and it's okay. But then the next thing to realize is that while there are some things that are very difficult and some things maybe even that we can't do, and there's a lot of things we probably shouldn't do, that doesn't mean that there's more things we can do, there's more you can do than you can't. There's some things we can't do. There are more things we can do. And what can we do about this situation? How can we make this different? One of the mantras that my parents would say that would frustrate me at the time, and now I say it to all my kids, is they would say, can't never did anything, poor try had to do it all. And so when I would say I can't do something, that would be what I'd hear in response, which didn't help me to be happy at the time. But there's a lot of truth in that, is that there's, we can try things differently and we'll discover there's a lot more we can do than we can't. So hopefully that helps people.
Dan, and if I could just add to that,
Yeah.
When your loved one is feeling that kind of frustration, they don't need you to be frustrated with their frustration. That's when you need to double down on patience and calmness and be like, okay, that's when you need to be listening. Like, they're really frustrated. You can't solve this for them. So you need to slow down. It's not about you. Listen to them. Be more patient in that moment, because more frustration would be fighting fire with fire and it wouldn't work. So that's when you need to be very deliberate and okay, this is when they need me to be helpful. This isn't when you're like, come on, let's just go. So I think you're right, Julia. It's hard to watch somebody be frustrated, because I think nowadays we want to fix it and we want to come up with a solution and we don't want people to feel bad and stuff. But this is when you need to step back and be calm and patient and listen, I think.
Yeah, that's excellent. And I want to flip that around now too, to those who are on the call who are blind and visually impaired. As your friend, as your family, as your loved one is also going through the adjustment process, there might be times where they're frustrated with the situation. And that's not a time for you to get frustrated that they're frustrated with you. It's time for you to recognize that they're going through the adjustment process as well. So everything that Debbie just said related to the friend or family with someone who is blind and visually impaired adjusting also goes the other way as well. So thank you, Debbie, for saying that.
No problem. We should come up with a schedule, like on odd days, it's your turn to be frustrated. And then on even days, I get to be frustrated. And then we could just work it on out.
Saturday's my day. Okay. All right.
Me with the frustration, how would I alleviate the other person helping me to alleviate the frustration that they're having? Is it something that can be explained or something like that?
I'm following you, Dave. So I'll answer that since we're answering from the point of view of the person who is blind and visually impaired. When I can see that Debbie's frustrated with the situation, Like she said, that's not a time for me to get frustrated. That's the time for me to listen to their frustration and to then think about, and I would be thinking about, is there anything that I'm doing that's causing frustration? And is there anything that I can do to help them right now? I'd be looking, for example, if I needed to get lots and lots of rides from my brother to go shopping or to do something like that, I would make sure that I'm kicking in for gas money. Well, when we do go shopping, I might pick something up for him that I know he likes. And I'm not doing that as a payment. I'm doing that because it's my brother and I love him and he's helping me. I make sure that I'm contributing to the relationship while also being helped by the relationship as well. It's a symbiotic relationship, and I need to be making sure that I'm not always asking him for rides. I would build a network of individuals and resources and organizations that I could turn to, and make sure I'm not asking my brother to give me a ride every 3 times a week, 4 times a week. Maybe it's once every other week or something like that. And I have a network of people that I'm working with to try to make sure that I'm not depending on him too much, which is he wants to help me, but maybe I could be in a way burdening the situation. And so I need to make sure it's a mutually beneficial relationship. Does that help, Dave?
Yeah.
Dan, if I could add something
Go ahead.
too, I think there is a tendency sometimes, like I'm frustrated and now I'm frustrated. It's not me against Dan, it's me and Dan against vision loss. So like our frustrations aren't fighting each other. We need to join together and direct our frustrations and then come up with solutions. Like I'm not mad at Dan. I'm mad that his eyes don't work. And Dan and I work together to like deal with our frustrations with vision loss. So I think there's also, that goes back to collaboration, is like, it's not me against Dan, it's us against the situation.
Yeah.
We're partners. Yeah.
Direct that frustration, not at each other, but at the situation, and then come up with solutions or wallow in it together. That's more.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all for being here. Thank you for taking time out on a Friday night. I know there's a lot of places you could be. Thank you for being here. And we'll be sure to edit this recording and to put it onto our YouTube channel. And we'll send it out in an email blast announcement. And in that email blast, we will also include the links to the Lighthouse Guild support groups that are available, as well as maybe a few other resources that might be able to help individuals who have friends and families with vision loss.